Jacob Buer show today. I am so happy to have on Stu Cook of Clearance Clearwater Revival, CCR, especially people in my age group. Take us through before we even get into CCR and what it's like performing one of the biggest bands ever, being a founding member. Take me through how did you fall in love with music?
Both my parents were musicians, and my dad played trumpet, my mom played keyboards. So there was always music and instruments in the house. So what went from just annoying doodling to a hobby to a career.
Wow. So obviously, being in California, that's the West Coast. So much is going on. You obviously met all your bandmates, which everyone knows. So we don't have to cover that. I'm not going to ask you that question because you've answered that 1,000 times. So I like to be different. What is the first moment like when you're recording an album? Let's go before obviously all the big hits came out. What was that moment like for you?
I can remember the first recording session. We were all crammed into a studio that couldn't have been larger than a bathroom. In fact, Doug had there wasn't room for Doug to sit on his drum stool throne. He had to sit on the windowsill. So it was pretty tight. And that was in, I want to say 1958, I think. Uh, I'd been in the band about 2 weeks, and we were already in the recording studio. So,
Wow. 2 weeks.
yeah, I mean, it was just, kind of overwhelming. But the,
Wow.
and that was long before albums. Albums were things that other people did. We were just making singles, trying to, get a record deal, get radio play, things like that. So albums didn't come till much later.
And what's really interesting is obviously, and I'm kind of taking this back a step sooner than I would have asked you this question, but you guys played at Woodstock, obviously, and that's, right where y'all are from, kind of. What was that moment like for you? Because that's kind of your home turf. It's like, I'm playing here now, I'm playing, I'm not playing in Asia or I'm not playing in Europe. I'm playing kind of where I'm from. What was that personal moment like for you?
You mean you're talking about Woodstock?
Yes.
Yeah, well, I'm not from Woodstock, obviously, but it's 3,000 some odd miles from my uh, hometown, my original hometown. But uh, nobody expected Woodstock to be any big deal. It was just going to be another concert. It was summer full of concerts, right? Festivals. And it was a wonder that it ever even happened. I think they moved the location two or three times before they settled on Bethel, and nobody expected near the audience. The crowd was several hundred thousand more than they expected, and it quickly turned into a free concert, and then later became a kind of an epic event. In hindsight, of course, that was what we remember about Woodstock is mostly from the film. It was when we were there, it was quite a bit more hassle. There was uh, it was fairly inconvenient. Of course, backstage we had wine and weed and steaks, and life was different than for the audience. But yeah, people did well with very little that weekend. It was amazingly peaceful, and probably the high point of the new generation. I think it went started to go downhill from there.
And for you, is it people say this all the time, and obviously you've experienced it, so you can give a legit answer on this. People say that it's scarier to play in front of 20 people in a small room because all the eyes are looking at you than playing in front of 400,000 people or 60,000 people because let's be real, everyone's drunk and high at a 60,000 venue. They might not be drunk or high at a 20-person venue where it's more one on one. So, to you, in all your years in music, do you feel that way?
I would agree that playing in a more intimate situation is can be more stressful because the focus is definitely on you. Whereas, as you pointed out, when you got 60, 50, 100, 200,000 people, there's a lot of distractions. Even though they're all there for the same thing, they got their own scenes going on. So you're really not playing to anybody specific in the audience. You might be playing to the people that you can see, but they're still 50, 60 yards away from you. Sometimes, on a big stage in a giant venue, and you're on a screen to them, right? You're not. You look like a little, like this big, but then you look up at the screen, right, and you can you get a different perspective. But yeah, small rooms are tougher because you really have to connect with everybody in the room. So you can't keep your head down.
For sure. And, I just got to ask real quick, of course, as a kind of quick side question. What was it kind of like auditioning for the Rolling Stones? Was it just, I mean, obviously at this point, you've done it all, was that just, um, another part, or was that kind of ceremonial, getting that chance?
Well, the whole audition notion was ceremonial, I believe. I think that the Stones, and I'm a huge Stones fan. Uh, they use that opportunity just to make a media event out of. They weren't going to pick anybody that had any other musical connection, but they held auditions for a couple of days in New York, and I think again in London. But it was a great opportunity for me. I mean, I loved playing jamming with the Stones for 2 hours. Uh, it was really tough to beat. On the way out, I was living in LA at the time. I flew out, and the Timothy B. Schmidt from the Eagles uh, was also auditioning, and we got seated next to each other after a bit of conversation with a gate agent, and so we rode out to New York together, had dinner together, and I haven't seen him since, actually. But I've known Timmy since uh, the late '50s, early '60s when he played in a band in Sacramento called the New Breed, and our band was called the Gollywogs at the time, and we played the same venues. Sometimes we were on the same bill together. So it was a trip to see him audition. Be invited and to accept. So everybody's a Stones fan, aren't they? I mean, why wouldn't you take the opportunity to go play bass with the Rolling Stones? It was great. I kept saying, let's play this, let's play that. And at one point I said, let's play Connection. And Mick's guy came up to me and whispered in my ear, he said, that's a Keith song. We're only doing Mick songs today.
Wow.
and, and finally, I kept throwing titles out. Let's play this, let's play that. I've been there near 2 hours. And finally, Mick's guy comes up and whispers in my ear. He says, Mick says the audition's over. I said, great. So then uh, Ronnie rolled up a big fat joint and we smoked it and off I went.
So that's your Rolling Stones story.
Well, that's the short version of it.
Wow. And shout out to Nathan Adamson, who has a band at Purdue University where I attend, Sunny and the Stars, who really wanted me to ask that question. And I found it fascinating as well. So shout out
Yeah,
to
it was
Nathan. I
it
know,
was a real thrill, I mean, as big as Creedence was, the Stones are the Stones, right? They're even though Creedence
you
probably
can't compare apples and oranges. How about
yeah,
that?
we Creedence probably sold more records and had more, higher chart numbers and so on. The Stones and the Beatles, that I mean, those are the two bands that turned everybody on to the whole new music world that's unfolded since then. Before then it was like our parents' music, really. Unless you listen to a lot of R&B and stuff like that, like we did, most of the music that everybody listened to was some kind of watered down country pop.
Yep. And I got to ask this question because it's always cool. You kind of mentioned the ego story you kind of had with auditioning when you were with the Rolling Stones. And this is just fascinating because obviously the Beatles, too, like CCR, ended up, solo. You guys all went solo, kind of. Obviously, you had the
Yeah.
Revisited band, but did you ever get to perform, one on one with Paul McCartney after, or Ringo Starr, or George Harrison, anything like that for fun?
I, we played when I was in a band called the Don Harrison Band with Doug Clifford. We uh, we played a festival in England called the Nebworth Festival, and the Stones were the headliner, and 10cc was special guests, and we were like the band that opened the show, right? Uh, Early in the afternoon, and I met Paul McCartney backstage. He's the only Beatle I've ever met, but usually Creedence just when Creedence became popular, we suddenly went from opening for Canned Heat to headlining Coliseums.
Wow. So is Paul McCartney, was he a CCR fan?
I didn't ask, but I mean, who isn't?
Fair. I am. And then kind of take me through what was it like for you, obviously, with you and the other band member, Doug, being able to do, I think I have it correct, the Revisited band for about 20 years,
25.
1990, 25, after you
Yeah.
got in the Hall of Fame, which for those who don't know, my age, Bruce Springsteen was there to give the speech in 1993. He was inspired, like Tom Petty and many others, by CCR. What was that like for you? I guess the Hall of Fame and then doing the band with Doug afterwards to cover.
The Hall of Fame was a giant mess. Our induction was a train wreck. Uh, it's all out there for people to explore if they have any interest in it. But it was not a good night for the band or for any of us personally.
Wow. And then of course, what was it like afterwards, being able to do the band for 25 years,
Well, I
up
think
until
I
on a
think
positive note.
well, sure. I think that night uh, planted the seed for the Revisited project when Doug and I felt like, hey, we were part of this band, and it's our legacy as well. And nobody else is out there from the original band playing the music. Fogerty was boycotting the music, refusing to play it, and I went and saw him in concert a couple times, and he would tease the audience with like the opening lick to Green River, then he wouldn't play Green River, and so on. Uh, so yeah, Doug and I got together with Elliot Easton from the Cars and Steve Gunner, a guy who played with the Go-Go's and done a whole lot of session work in LA. Played in a lot of really cool bands. Uh, and John Tristeo from People. Uh, the five of us got together in 1995, and we retired in 2020.
Yeah, right before COVID.
Yeah,
Um,
like it's crazy. We play our last gig in Zacatecas, Mexico. We played a big gig in Mexico City, and then another big gig in Zacatecas, I think it was. Then I came home, and my wife and I flew to our vacation spot in the Caribbean, a little island called Roatan, part of Honduras, and we were there. We're going to play a charity event, and then suddenly the island gets locked down, closed. No flights in, no flights out. And of course, the charity event was canceled. And I was there for 7.5 months. So
wow.
I was, and while we retired, and then like a week later, our entire industry disappeared.
Wow. And then obviously, thankfully, we're back now. Um,
Sure.
And take me through, I guess, kind of one last thing I wanted to discuss that I think is really monumental is obviously you've had the unique chance to do so many things as solo and obviously with CCR. You've had experiences that people dream of in the music world. And obviously, not everybody can make it to that point, which is something I always like to be honest with as a host. I want to inspire people who listen to the show, but I also want them to know that just because that guest was able to become a billionaire or able to become CCR are able to become forward, or not everybody can. So, what would you have advice for people of why rock history is important, for one, and then kind of two, advice you'd have for aspiring musicians?
Well, it's not the easiest way in the world to make a living. Actually, you got to be really lucky. We were blessed. After 9.5 years of eating dirt, we finally got a hit. I mean, a real hit, a national hit. We had small, regional stuff in Sacramento and, Fresno, California, little valley towns, Lodi, but never had a song that charted nationally till Susie Q. And it's a tall mountain to climb. So I would say, while you may think, if you think you have some talent and you think gotta follow a muse, your own, go for it. But it would be probably a good idea to have a plan B as well. I always advise people to get as much education as they can because that can't hurt you.
That's a good point. That's why I'm in college, even though I do this show. And I enjoy interviewing people. And then kind of my last question is, obviously, and I kind of this was a two-part question. Excuse me there for a little gaffle. And why is rock always going to be important in your opinion?
Rock,
Yes, rock music.
I don't know that it's always going to be important, but um, the the number of different genres of music that are available now with streaming and Spotify, Pandora, just you can pick your slice of the pie. The pie is, there used to just be country, pop, which was mostly country, rhythm and blues, which became soul, then disco, then I don't know what they call it now. Uh, Basically white music and black music. And there's classical music and jazz, which is, an offshoot of blues, and it's black music. It's really America's only real musical art form is jazz. Uh, but because rock is, derived from country and the blues. But, to me, when I listen to music, I listen to Ray Charles and Duke Ellington uh, and the Stones, of course, Tom Petty, the Foo Fighters. I think is a good example of a they're not a new band. I mean, they're from the 90s, right? Queens of the Stone Age, another one of my favorites, but they're not a new band. I don't hear any new bands really that are rocking to me. I mean, I think rock is probably it might come back in some form or another, but it was a genre of music that sort of was grabbed by my generation, and then it's evolved into different as everything gets blended, and comes back out, you got variation upon variation, but uh it's all out there for people to explore. At least there's more access to different kinds of music now, different flavors. uh Rock was just the first one that was different than anything before.
For sure, no doubt about it. And, you look at all the great bands that people still consider today. Is there any other advice you have before we go?
I think that that everybody could benefit from being a better listener. You know, just in general, I think that if people listened more, try to understand what they're hearing, If it doesn't make a lot of sense, dig a little deeper before you repeat it. I think we find ourselves in a better situation.
I agree. I think we do need to listen more, and I think we need to not judge as quick. So I think that's very good advice, especially to judge one for all the young people out there. I think judging others before you get to know them, rumors and things is a big thing. So thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, social media has its benefits, but it also has some brought along with it a lot of misinformation and just pure disinformation that it's a lot harder to find out what's really going on now. So spend more time listening and investigating, and I think that we'll have a better world.
You're right about that. Well, Stu, it was such a privilege to interview you, and thank you so much for the work you've done, not just in music, but all around. And this
Well,
interview
thanks.
means a lot to me. So thank
Nice
you.
speaking. Very nice speaking with you today.
Thank you.